Destiny is apparently a really big deal. It's what happens when famed developer Bungie is let loose on more than one platform, and it's had a ton of hype since its announcement. It's also had a public beta recently. I actually got to play in the beta before it went completely public, so here are a few of my thoughts on the beta. Before anything else, I'll address the elephant in the room. I played on 360. Ugh, but wouldn't it look like shit on 360? Bungie developing this primarily for next gen, right? What are you doing? No. Destiny beta on 360 looks like every other game on the system. The overall image is lacking in detail a little, and when you examine the game closer, you can see the seams bursting with all the magic running behind the scenes that the developer somehow managed to get running on an 8-year-old system. To be honest, I found the visuals of Destiny beta to be totally passable and frame rates to be mostly playable with only minor stutter here and there. Keeping in mind this is all happening about 2 months before the release of the game across 4 systems, I was impressed by what Bungie and Activision had to offer. Yes, the game will look better on Xbox One and PS4 no matter how you look at it, but I paid $100 for my box when they paid upwards of $400 for theirs. I'm not complaining. From what I could gather, humankind is on the brink of extinction, and it's your job as the chosen one to carve out the universe of baddies so the human race can be restored to its former glory. And you happen to be joined by an alien race and a robot race. It's not explained entirely in the beta, and if it was, I wasn't paying attention. Most of the important storytelling happens in cutscenes, which I felt caused a bit of a disconnect between me and the world. If this is how Bungie is set on telling the core of its story, it's lost me. Speaking of the world, I'm not a fan. The biggest downside is the sound design. There's probably going to be some sweeping orchestral pieces in the more narrative-focused chunks of the game, but I've always found a world to be more pleasant to be in if it creates an atmosphere I can drown myself in. And if I'm not feeling involved in the game world when I'm actually playing the game, it'll be hard to keep hold of me beyond the opening hours. Speaking visually, the game world was nicely detailed, and it avoided any janky level of detail transitions that took me out of the experience, something 360 games have been guilty of since the platform's introduction. If you get up close to any of the textures, you'll find the platform being pushed to its limits, with downscaled textures compared to its more mature new-gen versions. But honestly, who runs up to walls in console shooters to complain they look like shit anyway? Destiny beta doesn't feature an open world as many had hoped, but compartmentalized zones that are used to carry out specific missions. These zones often had players dropped in at random, and it was never obvious whether or not they were actually performing the same task as me. More importantly though, is that the game didn't do a good job of dropping in players at the same level as me. This became a problem when enemies started scaling out of my reach and made the overall experience more of a pain in the ass than anything else. I couldn't find any options in the menus to turn this seemingly random matchmaking off. And all I can do now is hope the game isn't hosted server-side a la Diablo 3 style. Now that I've gotten all the bullshit out of the way, I can talk about what Destiny beta really does best: gameplay. Those missions I mentioned earlier have appropriate level requirements for both a normal and a hard version of the mission, which I felt was thought out well. They'll have you carry out a number of different tasks, like finding certain items, defeating certain bosses, and defending certain points. None of this is particularly groundbreaking, but I found it did a good job of keeping the pressure on in sections of the mission where you're doing at least one of these things along with fending off waves and waves of enemies. Like I mentioned, none of this is going to blow your mind, but I enjoyed how the missions were structured and felt the difficulty was balanced perfectly for someone who is capable, not adept, at console shooters. The weapon handling is top-notch though. Anyone who's played Halo Reach or Halo 3 will feel right at home with how all the guns feel, from semi to full auto guns, snipers, shotguns, and anything else. All of the weapons are useful and feel satisfying to use. Outside of these zone-based missions, there is a hub town of sorts that's there to progress story missions at set intervals. More importantly though, it's used for housing a decent number of vendors and other NPCs that can help augment your play experience or alter it, by letting you swap out current experience with those sold at stores to give the battle rhythm a bit of variation. Biggest downside of the entire experience, however, not enough androgynous character creation options. I'm notorious for sitting in front of Guild Wars 2, that character customization screen, for over half an hour to build a character, and its butt that I'll be looking at for hours on end. While Destiny isn't an RPG, it's hard to shake that feeling from an experience that shouted, "What a beat MMO." I mean, shit, is it that hard to have something in between super buff 3-meter wide jaw guy and chick? Is there room for something like this? In all honesty though, Destiny beta did a good enough job of buttering me up for the game's release in early September. Will I buy it? At this point, probably not. It felt more than anything like what would happen if Borderlands and Halo hooked up, and since both those games encourage social play, it feels like that's what Destiny beta is geared towards too. Lately, I've been engrossing myself in more and more single-player experiences, and Destiny, while making room for those kind of experiences, isn't focusing on them. Thank you so much for watching. If you have anything else to say about Destiny, the beta, Bungie, Activision, or anything else, feel free to drop it below in the comments section. And if you haven't subscribed already, feel free to experience more video content like this. I think that's about it. I'll see you guys later.